a few months after he introduced the next generation of Rogue Squadron pilots. Michael A. Stackpole came out with Wedge's Gamble, a book with surprisingly little starfighter action, perhaps serving as a sneak peek for Aaron Alston's Wraith Squadron, which was sort of pilot-commando hybrids. Rogue Squadron spends most of the book undercover on Coruscant. And the title is a little confusing to me because this is not Wedge's Gamble. If anything, this is Admiral Akbar and the Provisional Council's Gamble. Wedge's Gamble made it to number 14 on the New York Times paperback bestseller list for the week of May 26, 1996. I actually remembered a lot more in Wedge's Gamble than I had in Rogue Squadron, which leads me to believe that I probably did reread Stackpole's X-Wing books, just skipped all the setup in book 1 and jumped right into book 2. We get more insight into Tycho's situation, and there's a whole lot of intrigue going on. So, a brief summary. The New Republic takes the momentous step of invading Coruscant and retaking the capital, and Rogue Squadron is sent undercover to gain vital intelligence. But little do they know that Esaid Isard is setting a trap. She wants them to retake Coruscant, and she is ready to unleash a deadly virus on the non-human populace. I really liked Wedge in this book. He's got an awful lot on his plate, but he handles it pretty well. He also had some really nice insight into how the Empire works and how people are able to live under it, which I'll talk about later. I liked his Colonel Rowett disguise, and I will be very happy to see that again. The only thing that I'm questioning of his decisions is the choice to not let anyone know that Tycho and Emtray were on Coruscant, because, well, I know that he wanted a card up his sleeve, someone who could help him if everything went to crap. The way that he went about it looks suspicious and seemed to directly lead to Tycho's arrest at the end of the novel. I'm happy to say that I found Corran vastly improved. Unlike book 1, he is no longer an arrogant loner. He's a team player now. So good job, Corran. You're still not my favorite character, but I don't mind reading about you so much. I do have to say, though, that his Coruscant history is maybe my least favorite part of his character, simply because I just don't like reading about cop characters. Someone's probably going to say, he wasn't a cop, he was an investigator, but he worked for Coruscant, he just didn't wear a uniform, he's still a cop. And there was a little bit of progress on Corran's love life, I guess. He's propositioned by Arizi again. He turns her down again. Seems like the rapport between him and Mirax is building, and he says to her before they leave on their final mission that, you know, he really wants to get to know her better, but now he's presumed dead and actually imprisoned in Isard's Lusankya prison, so we'll see what happens there. Tycho's backstory is greatly fleshed out, both in stories told by Tycho himself and also in information that's shared by Winter, and it just makes his situation so poignant. He lost everything in an instant. He defected, he came over to the Rebel Alliance, he was in so many actions. He was sent undercover to Coruscant, captured by Isard, and escaped. But the problem is that the people that Isard captures, she reprograms, and no one has any idea what's happened to them, that they've been turned into these killers until they kill. So people consider Tycho a walking time bomb, and he's 100% sure that he's not. But the New Republic leadership, and increasingly Corran, don't trust him. It makes you really feel for him, and it makes me respect him even more that people distrust him so much, and yet he's still willing to serve, and he's still willing to help, and he has saved rogues' lives so many times that I'm sure that he'll be okay. If I think really far back in my memory, I'm 100% sure that he'll be okay, but it makes me nervous for the trial that's gonna come in the third book. Of the other rogues, we get, I guess, a better sense of Arizi Delaret. Basically that she's a very attractive lady, but the more Corin gets to know her, the more he realizes that she's not nice. She's on their side, but her upbringing has given her an opinion of herself and her place in the world that's just sort of, it goes beyond Corin's level of arrogance into a new level of arrogance. So I can see why Mirax calls her the Bacta Queen. Of the other rogues, the only one that really gets more development, which was needed at this point, is Gavin Darklighter, which was nice. Now he's not just the teen from Tatooine that knows about Beggar's Canyon. He sees things and he's forced into situations that he's never had to be in before. And he's naive, but he's learning. I wish, though, that we had gotten a little bit more of the rapport between him and Chiol, his wingmate, because that's another character that has barely spoken. We just know the basic sketch of his backstory, but that's it. And then we have 4 new / soon-to-be rogues, but they're just sort of filling in the gaps that were left by previous rogues. So we lose Bror Jace, Hotshot Pilot, and we get Pash Kraken, Hotshot Pilot. To replace Andor Ni Hui, a female Rodian, we get Errol Numb, a female Celestin. And then our soon-to-be rogues include a Bothan, a Seer, to replace the dead Bothan, and Inri Forge to replace her sister, Lu Jane. I was a little confused, though, about Bror Jace's death. Mostly that we got a throwaway line in an earlier chapter where Wedge is thinking of all the rogues that were lost, and he lists Bror Jace. And I was going, wait, Bror Jace was just going home. And it's not till a few chapters later that we actually get the story from Corin that he was heading home, and Interdictor pulled him out of hyperspace and presumably killed him. So I felt like the timing of that could have been better. And while the rogues are undercover on Coruscant, we are introduced to Aiella Wasiri, who was Corin's partner in Coruscant. And we're reintroduced to Winter, who has an eidetic memory and was most prominently Leia's sort of aide / personal assistant / babysitter in the Thrawn trilogy and the Jedi Academy trilogy. Aiella will sort of become a romantic interest for Wedge in later books, but nothing's happened there so far. And Winter and Tycho definitely seem to have some history. I believe it's from the Rogue Squadron comic, so that's another thing that we will see more of. And then jumping over to the bad guys. Our overarching bad, Iceheart, Esain Asar. She's obviously very intelligent, but we see so little of her that I don't really have a sense of her beyond scary, intense evil lady. Curtin Lore is a lesser evil. I can very much see why when Corin saw him, it wasn't that he was scared of him, it was that he just wanted to run over and murder him. Lore's obnoxious. He relies too much on his memory, but we get a little bit more into his character in this one. Basically that he's been ruled by fear for so long that he's gonna rise above it, but he's still got a hate boner for Corin. Yeah. General Dericote is interesting because he is also obviously an intelligent person. He's able to create this deadly virus, but he has absolutely no compunctions testing it on people, knowing that it will just completely dissolve their bodies and leave them in torment. And then we have Zekathine. He is a Black Sun criminal that is one of the criminals that's released from Kessel. He has his backstory with Corin. He hates Corin. He doesn't feel like a viable threat, though, because he's just so stupid. He's stupid enough to antagonize Corin. He's stupid enough to backtalk to Moff Voru. His death does not come as a surprise to me. However, the fact that Inri kills him does feel a little surprising just because her turn of heart happens a little too sudden for me. You could probably approach it from the point of view that it's the good side, it's the side that's like her sister Lu Jane coming out, but she sort of went from very hostile to helping the rogues, and there wasn't a lot of in between. I said that Wedge's Gamble has surprisingly little starfighter action. We do have some scenes in the beginning when Zinj is sending ships out to sort of spy on what the New Republic is doing, but once we're on Coruscant, we don't really get anything until the very end when they're trying to take down the shields. And the fact that Rogue Squadron is so essential to this plan of getting in there, getting information, taking down the shields, strikes me as a little implausible. Clearly, the New Republic intelligence has operatives in place on Coruscant. I mean, we meet Aayla and Winter, and I'm sure there are even more that we don't know the names of who we don't meet. So surely they have been gathering information on their defenses, the mood of the people, all the stuff that Rogue Squadron is sent little by little in to gather. So why do they even have to be there? Couldn't Aayla and Winter and the rest of them have gathered all this, sent it back, and Rogue Squadron just gets sent to take down the shields? I don't know, it seems hard for me to believe that they would be such an integral part of the intelligence gathering when surely they've already gathered that intelligence at this point. I'm also surprised that the Provisional Council, particularly Leia, was so keen for Thalia's plan to release Black Sun criminals from Kessel on Coruscant, especially because this book came out right after Shadows of the Empire. If you were someone who was reading them as they came out, to go from Black Sun is really bad, we gotta completely take them down, to let's reintroduce them to Coruscant, I'm sure they'll just only cause trouble for the Empire, had me scratching my head a bit. And part of the reason that they're released is to cause mayhem. But Black Sun seems to be causing very little mayhem on Coruscant. Obviously, Fine has this speeder bike chase and tries to kill Corran, but then very quickly they get drawn into Rogue Squadron's plan to take down the shields. So I'm not quite sure I buy the reasoning behind why they were released, other than Stackpole wanted Zekathine there, and he also wanted to bring Inri Forge into the squadron. Speaking of implausible, Corran's speeder bike chase was a bit too coincidental for me. He's running from Zekathine and the other Black Sun people. In the process, he manages to throw the other speeder bike through the window where Wedge and Co. are meeting. And then he just happens to drive his speeder bike to Invasec, where the rest of Rogue Squadron are currently being pinned down by stormtroopers. I can admit that, yes, that then did bring all of Rogue Squadron together when they'd been separated, but it's just a bit much. I both really like Isard's Krytos trap, but at the same time wonder about the efficacy of the virus. Basically, she really wanted something airborne. Daracote was only able to get it fluid-borne. So if you touched the vomitus or whatever, or if the virus was in the water supply, you're gonna get sick. But there's no airborne quality to it. Maybe just because we're living through unprecedented times right now, but a waterborne virus, so I guess I'm thinking of something like cholera. It's just easier to stamp that out. So while the Krytos virus does sound very scary, there's a part of my mind that wonders how much of a threat it really is. But on the other hand, I just think her idea is sadistically genius. She knows it'd be too hard to try to keep Coruscant, so she decides that, well, they might as well have it. But if they have it, it's going to be an absolute hellhole. So we have a virus that attacks non-humans, not humans, so presumably going to raise that kind of anti-alien tension. And what I think is most genius is that it's not something like the Black Death. It's not really, really fatal for most of the people that get it. There is a cure, and the cure is Bacta. But Bacta is something that is both very expensive and there is a limited supply of. It is true that compared to the Empire, the New Republic would do anything to save people. So knowing that this virus has a cure could very well bankrupt the New Republic. It's horrible, but it's genius. I also liked the way that Stackpole developed Coruscant, especially with Invisec. It's the alien protection zone or something like that, the invisible sector. We've got hints in previous books that the Emperor was anti-alien, and this makes it very visible. Coruscant has almost a ghetto for the alien residents, that they have to stay in this particular spot, and it's not as nice, and it's crime-ridden, and there's hazards. I also liked some of the insights we got into the Empire. When Wedge is entering Coruscant in his Colonel Rowett disguise in chapter 14, he has a section where he thinks about the people that live under the Empire, and there's probably half of them who think that everything is perfectly fine and it's great and the Empire is doing good things. And then there's another half who admit that things aren't great, but also can't admit that the situation is so bad that complete insurgency is the answer. They think, oh, well, if we just fixed the system, work within the system, it will be all right. But the Empire is rotten from the core outwards, and you can't fix something that's so wrong. Usually when I read these books, I'll read my chosen Star Wars book, and I'll alternate it that week with another book. So I felt like it was very prescient this week that I was reading a nonfiction book about tourists in Germany before World War II, because a lot of the things that were coming up in that book were coming up in Wedge's Gamble. The Empire has always been sort of fascist in space, and that never felt more obvious to me than in this one, that you just have the maltreatment of so many people that they need, but they're not willing to admit are their equals. And while I didn't agree with the logic of why Rogue Squadron was on Coruscant, I do have to say that the action scenes were pretty exciting. Both the ones that fail, like when they're trying to get the computer cores and they're completely ambushed, or the final one when they take over the mirror and use that to destroy the computer. So, in short, there are some things in Wedge's Gamble that the logic is just a little thin. It's very easy for me to pick it apart. Did it make sense for Rogue Squadron to be undercover in this book? Not always. But was it also exciting? Did it have some much needed character development? And did it end on an exciting cliffhanger? It did. So I guess my final thoughts on Wedge's Gamble is that the concept is a little far-fetched, but the execution is surprisingly enjoyable. So next, I'll be jumping back into the Black Fleet Crisis with the second book, Shield of Lies by Michael P. QB McDowell.